Broadcasting from the North Fulton studio of Business Radio X, it's time for North Fulton Voices. This show is brought to you by the North Fulton Improvement Network, addressing the workforce housing crisis in our region. Now, here are your hosts.
And hello again, everyone. I'm John Ray. Welcome back to North Fulton Voices. I'm here alongside Kathy Swahn and Jack Murphy, both of the executive team of NFIN, the North Fulton Improvement Network. Kathy, Jack, welcome back.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one because we're talking about seniors today, and you've brought two great guests to address some of the issues that are involved with seniors and housing in the North Fulton region. Jack, to kick us off, you've got a few interesting facts for us, right?
Thanks, John. I just seem to love to dive into data. One that I thought frames the discussion is Redfin did a study of housing in the United States and found that 78% of older Americans plan to stay in their homes as they age, which is interesting to, if you speculate, it could be the interest rates that's keeping them there. It could be the cost of homes. It could be anything. But it's, as somebody that's in this boat of living in a home that's far bigger than I need, there's no place for me to go. And I'm supposed to be leaving by now so that the next generation of families can move into our 3-bedroom house. And it goes all the way down to, why are people having to stay in hotels? Because they can't find affordable apartments. So it just goes and goes. Two other little statistics we've got is the average senior qualifies to rent a home that would be, or an apartment would be $550 a month based on income in North Fulton. But the average 1-bedroom apartment runs $1,574. So that's more than 84% of their income. That makes it very difficult for them to live in North Fulton. So with those two bits of statistics, bits of data to frame our discussion, I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jack, that's also based on Social Security income, which is about $1,800 or $1,900 a month. A lot of our folks we know aren't necessarily living just on Social Security income, but it's still, there are a lot of dead ends when it comes to them trying to make decisions about their future housing. So I'd like to introduce our guests today. With us is Tanya Morris. Tanya is the Client Services Director at Senior Services North Fulton. Senior Services provides senior centers, Meals on Wheels, transportation, lots of great programs for our seniors. Tanya's an active member of our North Fulton Improvement Network and has been for a while. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
And then Beth Cayce is the CEO and founder of CaraVita Senior Care and Home Care. And she just reminded me, we met about this situation years ago about the struggles of CNA, home health care workers trying to earn enough money to live, throw in transportation, which is outrageously expensive. And I thought we met 4 or 5 years ago, and she just told me it was 12 years ago. So we obviously are having this challenge year over year. And part of the goal of our North Fulton Improvement Network is to grab this demon and try and wrestle it to the ground so that we can all live comfortably in our North Fulton area. So why don't we start with you, Tanya? You want to tell us a little bit about Senior Services?
Sure. So Senior Services North Fulton is a nonprofit that's been in the community here for about 33 years now. And as you said, we do senior centers, Meals on Wheels, case management, that kind of thing. And we are definitely seeing an increase in seniors struggling with housing security. So whether they're living in a home or an apartment that they've been in for years, they can no longer afford to stay there. And we're seeing an increase in homeless seniors. So seniors that have maybe been evicted and now don't have a place to go, or left voluntarily because they couldn't afford it, so before eviction, and don't have a place to go.
It's interesting because when NFIN started, I think 14 years ago, it came out of Johns Creek because they were seeing a lot of seniors, homeless seniors, showing up at their offices. And we've evolved from that, but it is a significant problem, and we're glad to hear from you about that because people don't realize that's the case.
Yes.
Okay, Miss Beth, our last meeting 12 years ago. That's hard to believe.
Time flies.
Yeah. Please tell us a little bit about CaraVita.
CaraVita is an organization that I founded 26 years ago, and it came out of my background from doing senior living and healthcare, not only in Metro Atlanta, but all over the country. And I got very lucky in that the company was sold, and for the first time I had money that I could invest. And I said, what do I want to invest in? And I wanted to invest in our community. I wanted to come back and bring all the lessons I'd learned for caring for seniors across the country back to our neighborhood of Roswell, North Fulton. And that's exactly what I did. So I set up CaraVita Home Care to do that, to serve seniors in their homes, and also to help guide families in terms of how do you transition someone from a hospital or rehab to home in a safe way, or how do you decrease the incidences of injury or disease living in the home so you can live longer in your home. So that was the primary founding force. Additionally, we founded a senior living division, which also provides community-based housing for people throughout the metro and all over Georgia and South Carolina. So that's a little bit about my background.
Wow, you've grown. Now you're in South Carolina too. Good for you. Good. Jack, you want to start with a couple of questions?
Yeah, when we talk about housing, particularly in the healthcare world, we're not only talking about housing for the customers, if you will, but for the employees as well.
Yes.
So what challenges are you both seeing for both those audiences?
Well, I'll tell you right now, our average caregiver, 90% of them don't live in this North Fulton area. They're all commuting. And over the 26 years I've done it, and even within the last 10 years, transport's a huge issue. Not just the cost of gas, because actually that's a little bit stabilized now from where it had been, but just commute. You're talking a minimum, because there's no housing available for them, of an hour commute in here and an hour commute out. And that's in a lot more dense traffic than what we even had 10 years ago. So the question is, do I want to work in North Fulton? Or if I get a job that's closer, would I go there? So that's one of our very large challenges. The second one is because of the affordability issue. Now, we've had a 35% rate increase for what we have to pay our direct care staff and our nurses. That's huge. To overcome that, we've had to increase our rates. Not as much as 35%, but we've definitely had to do that, decreasing the margin. But the reality is, even in doing that, if there's a closer job, they're going to go there. And it's not because they don't have loyalty to the company, but they've got kids that they've got to get from childcare. They got appointments they need to make for the school. It's just easier. So where we used to see dedicated employees that stayed with us, and not that we don't have some, they're not at the 70 and 80% level because, quite frankly, they're having to put food on the table and have transport that's reasonable to accommodate childcare as well as their home price increases.
And I think it's not just about the rates that have changed. You talked about wanting to stay in home. People are trying to stretch their own dollars that they have to spend for caregiving. And so people are thinking, oh, I just need help with getting up in the morning in a shower, but then I'm fine for the rest of the day and maybe going to bed. And so I just need an hour in the morning or whatever. You're not going to be able to get that because agencies, in order to attract, like Beth's and similar things, in order to attract caregivers, need larger shifts to be able to give them, because they're not going to drive to your house in Milton for an hour. They need a couple of hours, if not a whole day. And some agencies are even going to requiring you to commit to multiple days a week, where maybe you just wanted help once or twice a week to help with some housekeeping and medicine and bathing or whatever. And now you have to commit to multiple hours, multiple times a day. So even what caregiving looks like and what you're expecting if you age and say, oh, I'll just hire somebody to come in and help me, is looking different because of those issues.
And the reality that you're faced with is 70% of people over the age of 65 are going to need some level of care. 30% will not need anything, but 20% will need at least 5 years of some level of support, whether it be in the home or whether it be in long-term care or in senior living. The other thing that we've got is from the family caregiver availability. We used to have a 1-to-7 ratio. That means 7 family members available for the person. Now it's going to 1 to 4. And that's if they live in the home, which many of them live outside the area, and if they're not working. So this is a big challenge. So we know that we've got this huge wave that's coming. Where we are right now is we're at 17%. We're going to go to 20%, which is 1 in 5. We know that the senior living communities right now are not totally full, but they're going to be overrun. But the problem is, who can afford it? Right now, they've been built on upper income families with high assets. As that begins to dwindle and we have greater numbers of people and more of those in the middle class, there becomes a squeeze.
It's interesting that one of our stats is that by 2030, 1 in 5 Georgians will be over the age of 60, which I know we're not there yet. But speaking of assisted living centers, which it seems like they're popping up on every corner, how in the world can people afford that? What are the average costs, and what are you seeing as far as your clients trending back into that market or into that market?
Sure. I think right now, the average cost in the area is around like $4,000 or something a month, and it can range up to $6,000 a month depending on the type of care and things you need. And that's assisted living. That's not nursing home care. Mm-hmm. That's assisted living where maybe you're living there, they're providing food, cleaning, they're providing some level of care, but not that you need nursing every day or regularly throughout the day. This is maybe you need help with bathing, maybe you need help with some supervision, but it's not all the time. Yeah. So when you think the average person, like you had said, with Social Security, if they're relying on Social Security at $1,800 a month, and the average care for assisted living is $4,000 a month, you can see where we have a big problem.
And that affordability of building is very extensive. Mm-hmm. Literally right now, with the way interest rates are and construction costs, just to build the unit alone, what they have to charge on that portion is $1,500 a month. And that's without any care staff, any supplies, any insurance.
Just the capital investment.
Capital investment, which drives the question, which I know y'all will be talking about. We've got to have some tax incentives to bring in investment to build. Because if $1,500 is just covered in the mortgage, there's no way that affordability is going to be achieved.
In fact, we're starting to see in some of our statistics, when you look at census data, the folks that are leaving the county, mm-hmm. that are earning less than $75,000, because some of the things you've talked about, the housing, both for seniors and for mm-hmm. single family, is geared towards the upper incomes. And people are moving in. My wife works at the Alfreda Art Center. If you look at that area around there, that used to be all affordable homes. Mm-hmm. Now they're little McMansions everywhere. So that not only impacts the housing availability, but staffing, because that's the workforce that's affordable, mm-hmm. Not necessarily the folks that are earning $200,000 a year.
And it's cost, and it's also style of housing being built that we haven't even touched on yet. What you need to look for when you're thinking long-term home as you're aging. Because what you need even at 50 or 60 is not necessarily the same thing that you want to have at 80. So if you're trying to get into something, if you're thinking, okay, this is the home I'm going to age in, like this is the last home I want to buy, what do you need to look for? And it's not 4-bedroom houses for most people, unless they're living with their families in a multi-generational household. It's smaller location. It's one level. It's no stairs to get in and out. It's wider hallways and lighting even. There's lots that go into accessible housing that we should all be looking for as we get older and are looking to get into a home that's going to last for us.
And that's so important because as we age, it's interesting. People think they die because of age. They die because of disease and injury. And so back to what Tanya was saying, to have your house be made appropriate for you to age in place is incredibly important, because all it takes is one fall to break your hip, and you've got a 20 to 25% mortality within a year that you're going to die. And then if you do, that you're going to have to access help for that recovery. And can you afford to access that help for that recovery? And then you add dementia, and the dementia statistics for the safety that are involved and that type of monitoring that needs to occur. And you can see why looking at appropriately built homes for people to age in place or modifications of existing homes is incredibly important.
So your business models both involve being in the homes in addition to being in multifamily kinds of things. So what are you seeing among the folks you're visiting in homes with Meals on Wheels? Are folks trying to leave their home? Do they want to stay as long as they can? What are you seeing?
Yes. In general, we're seeing all of that. In general, people want to stay. If they have a home with their things and that they've lived in for whatever, even if it's a short time that they've lived there, people want to stay. They want to stay where they live. They want to stay where they have community or connection. If you have lived in this North Fulton for 20 years, you may have a church family. You may have your doctors here. You may have, the local grocery store people and that kind of thing, restaurants and the streets and things. As you start to struggle or as you get older and maybe your friends are moving away or your kids are gone, you don't want to have to leave that whole support network and go somewhere else. You want to be able to stay. So that's what people want to do. And that's where we see, okay, yes, maybe you've paid off your house, but what's happening with property taxes and HOA dues? And there's still the upkeep of the home. So that's when you start to see where maybe they're not getting their lawn mowed or they're not making preventative maintenance on their house and are just doing what they absolutely have to because that's what they can afford to do. So yeah, people want to stay in their own homes and live independently.
And that's a conversation I have every day. People will come into our office and they'll say, I'm just starting to plan to think about this. And I'm saying, what are you thinking about? And they're saying, when I might need help. I'm like, well, can you talk to me a little bit about that? And my question is, well, what would have to happen to you that you think would cause you to have to move? And that's a conversation they hadn't really thought about. But it is a conversation that's really important. Then the next question is, can I afford it? Mm-hmm. And how far away from my family would it be? Mm-hmm. And who would support me and come see me? So it's a very complicated discussion in terms of affordability, in terms of my preferences for my lifestyle and making things convenient. One of my big passions is how do we make this a livable community for people that have dementia? How can neighbors learn to help neighbors like we used to before we became so busy and incredibly on steroids?
I think a lot of it, too, is medical technology has advanced so much. People are living much longer. Mm-hmm. I know I used to work at North Fulton Charities, and I remember some of the seniors coming in there. They are outliving their money. They literally have stretched as far as they can. And thankfully, we have organizations that can provide some service in that area. But the medical technology, people are not planning for. They're not expecting to live to be 90 or 100.
And I think that there's a general assumption that there's family, that people have families. And I think for so many reasons, that's not the case. And it's going to be even less of the case as people have less children or decide to have no children at all, or as the job market requires people to be moving around to get jobs, to get raises, to get promotions, or if you can work remotely and it's more affordable to live other places, people are moving just because of affordability. So there's not necessarily, oh, I grew up in this town, my kids live in this town, they can help me, I have kids. I think that those assumptions are now false. And you may have, even if you do have a couple of kids, one might be in Seattle and one might be in New York and one might be abroad. And so assuming that your kids are going to be available and able to help you, I think, is not necessarily an accurate assumption.
Interesting.
Let alone have the personality to help.
And COVID, I think, has changed a lot of that most recently because people they can work remotely for their whole job.
Yeah.
What do you think, Beth?
Oh, definitely. I see families that here in Atlanta, they're moving out. They're moving out where the amenities are for their kids. A lot of them will move because of sports, school systems, a variety of reasons. And where we used to have clustered of nuclear families, that's gone further and further out. We manage, I would say probably 80% of the cases we manage may have family in town, but they don't live nearby. They're not within 30 minutes to get to their mom, sometimes maybe not even an hour, depending on traffic. And they're not seeing her as often. I think we're going to have to look to technology, which is also going to be one solution, because as we have less workforce, we're going to have to depend on technology to do some monitoring and interfacing for us, just because of pure distance and insight.
Boy, and that's tough on seniors, period, the technology world.
Oh, if you can't figure out the TV remote.
I know. or their telephone.
Yes, we
Hey,
all need help.
careful. Some of us are close to that anyway.
It doesn't even matter. I can't figure out the TV remote half the time with the smart TVs.
I just used as an example that the flashing light on the VCR, and the person I was talking to said, "What's a VCR?" Oh, yeah.
I love it. Yes. And it's just going to keep growing. And I think that technology can definitely be a valuable tool, but it's coming up with what's reasonable and then again affording it. It helps. It's part of the divide. When we were doing COVID, we had clients that our senior centers were closed because of safety. And so we were doing virtual programming. We were doing exercise over the phone, not like a smart call, but like over the phone, verbally. And we had clients or participants that couldn't even do that because they have pay by the minute phones. And so couldn't do that or couldn't make a link. It's amazing how many calls are actually long distance. We just don't think about it because it's a cell phone number these days. So I think, so the technology divide during COVID became more and more apparent as people that had the funds to buy internet or to have tablets and laptops and things like that, or smartphones. So not even just you knowing the technology, but being able to afford the technology will continue to be an issue and something we have to look at.
And making it user-friendly.
Always that.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would look like, honestly.
So as you travel in your circles, go to professional meetings, what are you hearing other places, other organizations doing about some of these challenges?
I can tell you from the senior living business, having been in it over 30 years, we constantly talk about middle income affordability. I can tell you from the 90s till now, we've been talking about it. And people keep trying to crack the nut. I do see a little bit on the horizon in terms of the tax credits that can be there, but then that has to be approved by the local area for zoning. And that has to be someone who's going to put up the tax incentives for someone to put up the investment. Because literally, as I talked about, if it's $1,500 just for the mortgage, you're looking at a $15-20 million project. And then you got to go find the land. And who wants that land to be near them? And you have to deal with that whole issue. But the question is, if we're going to survive, are we just going to be a community that people live in for a while and then move out? Or are we going to truly be a community that supports our own?
Yes. And I think that there's no one solution. I think people get frozen because they think they have to come up with what's the one idea that's going to solve all the problems. And I really don't think it's like that. I think housing and housing affordability is like a lot of other things. Where I might want to live and the style of house that I might want is different than what you're going to want and what Jack's going to want or what anybody's going to want. And so I don't think that there's one answer. So I think that there has been and continues to be people trying and looking at shared housing opportunities. Jack was talking about needing to sell his home, so he doesn't have to sell his home, but maybe he can get a roommate situation. So they have like roommate match and housemate match and different things like that. There's apps for that. But looking at those kinds of things, and then how do you do that safely? How do you screen people, your roommates, so that you can have somebody come in that you're actually going to want to live in? So I think people are looking at all sorts of different things. I think that they're looking at, some communities are looking at how they build. And instead of having three-story townhouses, they're looking at one house that looks like a big home, like a big mansion that has 3 one-level kind of condos. So instead of going up, we're horizontal instead of vertical.
Stack. I think they call it stacked
houses.
flats.
Yeah. So I think we just have to be creative and pool all those different ideas together to help address the need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that I don't think it will be one solution, because there isn't one solution that could solve the problem. The question is, how do we start the conversations in our communities? And how do we get our elected officials to understand this? Now, NFIN is advocating for middle-income housing, but we're not really trying to be political about it. We're trying to do it from an information standpoint. From where I sit, there's no incentive for elected officials to do anything different, because every time somebody displaces a $70,000 household with a $150,000 household, property tax goes up, which looks great to them. Plus, a home that looks old is replaced by something that looks beautiful. So how do we get this point across to elected officials and to our communities?
That's a challenge. It's a challenge. I often pray and think that as the numbers rise and the percentages rise, that those are voters still, and they still have a voice. I've lived in North Fulton for most of my life, and I see it as a wonderful neighborhood, but I also see many of my friends that are my age now moving out. They're moving out to further out areas where they can live. The question is, they're living in planned communities, and those planned communities are starting to build the amenities, much like a lot of these ILs, that allow them. And the next step will be putting in care in those planned communities that will be able to provide for them. That's something I think we need to do more of. And that requires, rather than having a neighborhood, a planned neighborhood, much like we're doing planned social connections.
And I'll get back to that because we went in two different directions, and I love that because, yes, shared caregiving is something that's been successfully used in the past, and I can give an example of that where I'm from Vermont. And they did that for younger disabled population that maybe was going out for jobs or was just living their lives, but needed an affordable place to live, but also need caregiving. And so they basically moved into apartments together and combined their resources to hire caregivers that served all of them. And so, again, planned communities where you get together and do that. So I think that's definitely one solution that I think is necessary.
In that missing middle section where we have seniors that...
In every section.
Yeah.
In every section, I think you're going to have it. And I think related to the politics of it, everybody's a potential voter. So you're definitely right, Beth, that just because we age doesn't mean we lose our ability to vote. So it is your constituents that you're talking about. But even if you're talking about your younger constituents, they have parents. They're starting to have to deal with these issues of, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to raise my kids, I'm hustling all over, and now my mother, my father is having a medical crisis, and what do? They're not here, or they are here, but they are... Heck, if I live in Gwinnett County and my mom is here in North Fulton, that's an hour drive. It's not like I can just pop over for 5 minutes, give them dinner, and then go home. That's a 2-hour commitment just to give them a dinner.
This is why I like seeing that ADU concept, the auxiliary dwelling unit, where grandma can have her little 800 square foot house in the backyard of the big house. A lot of areas are using that very effectively.
Or for caregivers, or for the younger people, the 20-somethings and whatever that are still just getting out
the first time.
Yeah, they don't need to live in your basement. They can live in your backyard in an auxiliary dwelling.
That's a nice commute.
Everybody can have their own space, because that's the other thing. I think we as a society value our own space and our own privacy. So I think that's sometimes one of the difficulties that people face as they age and are having to make some different choices. We hear this a lot. This is not what I thought. This is not what I had planned. I didn't plan to need a roommate. I didn't plan to have to leave. I worked hard. I saved, and this was not my plan.
Or I've outlived. I saved, but I didn't plan on living another 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
One of the solutions that we're looking at is a long-term solution. Of every city has a comprehensive plan. That's how they decide their zoning rules and that kind of thing. And we want to try to influence all the comprehensive plans this year, because some of them are coming up. But that's going to take a lot of citizen involvement. Mm-hmm. And I won't put you on the spot by saying we'd like to give you guys a lot of flyers to hand out, because we know seniors vote at a higher percentage than any other constituency.
Yep.
And they have direct knowledge of why this is important. Mm-hmm. So enlisting your help in this would be helpful. But what other ways do you think we could get people interested in the comprehensive plan, which sounds so boring, but is so important?
And I'm going to bring up the big elephant in the room. There has been for years ageism. We have ageism and we have stigma with people with dementia. And it's not something you want to think about until it's you. I think with the numbers growing, where we're looking at 20% of the population being seniors and them having families that are attached to that, it's not going to be something that can be ignored. But to do that, it's going to require awareness. Going to require a lot of awareness amongst people of there are people living in your neighborhood that have challenges. How can you help them? And one of the ways you can help for them is to begin to start figuring out better housing alternatives. As much as you can take them to the doctor, that's a short-term solution. Figuring out how they're going to live and be cared for is a long-term solution. But without increased awareness, people are just going to continue on their path until it affects them.
And I think that's really where it hits home. I think our agency has over 300 volunteers that help us deliver Meals on Wheels and our senior center. And I think the reason that people are volunteering is because they have a passion. They feel that there's a need. It has touched their lives somehow. And I think raising, like you said, awareness amongst that population, among the general population, talking about getting into the school systems and raising awareness about careers available with aging and just the needs, and that they're not scary people. It's just your grandma, your grandpa. It's just people that have great stories and great experience and great life that can be shared, I think is just very important.
And to your point, I've been talking to a few builders, developers that say, if you're trying to get your community to be more open to multifamily, start with seniors.
Yes.
Because they are important to most of us that have relatives here.
Yeah.
But also it's not as threatening to the community.
That whole multi-generational housing concept is so cool.
It's important because 40% of seniors are living alone. And if their families aren't nearby, they're not getting that connection of intergenerational. And if they're being socially isolated, and it's not in their neighborhood, then they're not getting the stimulation that they need of that whole intergenerational, that support that we need of reaching out.
This has been really fascinating. We thank you both for your time and for your wisdom. Anything you'd like to say before we close?
I think that start with something. Whether it's going to a meeting, a community meeting, whether it's getting involved in a comprehensive plan, whether it's just volunteering. I think that there's so much that all of us can do to learn and be impactful that you don't have to think of it as an elephant. Just think of it as a potato chip and just go and eat it. Just think of it as a potato. And get yourself started. Because once you do, it's just, you learn so much and it's so much more manageable if you can just make the first step.
Beth?
I think awareness is the first part. Part of why we started the dementia-friendly Fulton was to get awareness of what is it. It's not something I need to be afraid of. It's something I can get involved with. It's something I can help my neighbor. It's something I can help a business to make it easier for someone to not be socially isolated and get out and go shopping and feel understood. That just extends also into housing, that whole ability of where is grandma going to live? Is it going to be a place in a neighborhood I feel really good about where people are going to visit her? What does that mean? What does that look like? How can I personally be involved with that? Could I even learn to do some volunteer hours for my high school by going in a neighborhood and doing that? Could I start talking to my parents about maybe you need to consider this when you're talking to the city council member because you happen to have influence? It's one-on-one beginning to spread the word and, as Tanya said, to network and let people be aware. This is a challenge. It's not going to go away. It's only going to grow. And we're up for it. We're America.
Thank goodness, ladies.
I know, right?
We have folks like you. So in wrapping, if you could, Tanya, let us know how folks can get in touch with you or your organization.
Sure. Probably the easiest way is to go on the website because that way you can see what's available. We have resources and connect with us at ssnorthfulton.org and you can call us and we have an information referral line and always happy to help get information, answer questions.
And you have several senior centers, correct?
We have 7 senior centers, Meals on Wheels for pets, transportation, and care management. So we have a trained team of people that can help you link with the resources you need.
Awesome. Beth?
And you can reach us by also going on our website, CaraVitaHomecare.com. or sometimes you can just put in CaraVita, CaraVita.com, and that'll resource us in terms of helping you with any in-home needs or any overall care management needs, or over Dementia Life, which is a program that we help people manage people in the process as they go through their journey with dementia.
And they'll find that through your CaraVita website.
Through our CaraVita website.
I didn't know that was one of your arms, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and I think that one thing just to remember is that what we both mentioned here and that we hear over and over again of why it's important for you to be involved is because everybody we talk to, nobody planned this. Nobody planned for that. This is not how anybody planned it to be. So even though you think you have everything, it could impact you. And so you should get involved. Thank you.
Wow. Those are great words to end on right there. Tanya Morris, Beth Cayce, we appreciate you and the great work you do for seniors in this community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for beginning the discussion.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Jack, Kathy, this has been awesome. Thank you for bringing Tanya and Beth to the table to have this discussion.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely. And folks, just a reminder, this show, North Fulton Voices, is presented by the North Fulton Improvement Network. And North Fulton Voices is the go-to source for in-depth analysis and discussion of missing middle housing and the livability challenges confronting North Fulton. Listen as we understand the implications of this problem, explore innovative solutions, and examine why housing solutions like the ones discussed on this show are vital for North Fulton's future. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast app, that Apple, Spotify, they're on all the major apps. And this show is sponsored and offered as a service to the community by yours truly and the North Fulton affiliate of Business Radio X. So for Kathy Swahn, Jack Murphy, and our guest, I'm John Ray. Join us next time on North Fulton Voices.
Thank you for joining us on North Fulton Voices. This show is presented by the North Fulton Improvement Network, working to solve our community's workforce housing challenges. For more information, visit improvenorthfulton.org.